Hello everyone and welcome to the Kootneeti's YouTube channel. I am Niranjan Marjani. Today we are going to talk about Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister G.L. Peiris recently visited India and held talks with his Indian counterpart Dr. S. Jaishankar. In the past few months, Sri Lanka has faced severe economic challenges. At the same time, the geopolitical rivalry between India and China has also intensified to gain advantage in Sri Lanka. How important is the Sri Lankan foreign minister's visit to India? What has caused the economic crisis in Sri Lanka? And how Sri Lanka engages with both India and China? To discuss all these issues, we have with us Mr. Asanga Abeyagoonasekera. He is a senior researcher, author, and strategic advisor on geopolitics and international relations from Sri Lanka. Mr. Asanga Abeyagoonasekera, welcome to the Kootneeti.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So to start with, I would like to ask, how would you analyze Sri Lankan Foreign Minister G.L. Peiris' visit to India?
I think it's a huge success. The visit was with all the media reporting, mentioning various dimensions of the capturing various dimensions of the visit. I think the external ministers. Dr. Jaishankar, as well as Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Peiris, well experienced, in foreign relations as well as Indo-Lanka relations. This is the second time that Professor G.L. Peiris is serving as the Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister, and Dr. Jaishankar, being knowing Sri Lanka so well as he has served as a foreign service officer in Sri Lanka, so understands many issues. The Tamilian issue, which was raised, was a very important issue, which has long been ignored. About 35 years now, signing the 1987 Indo-Lanka Accord, and also about lasting reconciliation and peace, and is really important areas. Fisheries issues were discussed, as well as the biggest concern right now is the economic crisis, as you rightly mentioned. The many economists say that Sri Lanka is in a state of bankruptcy because of its foreign reserves have been very low. And India is actually one of the first countries who came for the rescue. And the amount that India has given, which is about $2.4 billion, I think it's a huge, relief for the Sri Lankan economy right now. And being the closest neighbor of Sri Lanka, and India has actually proven, as well as its strong relationship with Sri Lanka by assisting at the most difficult time that Sri Lanka is going through. The 2.4 billion consists of 500 million on the credit lines for oil, as well as currency swaps. To buy even the essential, it's quite difficult. I've been interviewing a few Sri Lankans about the economic situation in Sri Lanka. The commodity prices have gone up, the oil shortage, various dimensions of the economic crisis. So I think it's a huge success. The visit was timely, and we need to strengthen this relationship. And it's really important that both countries, strengthen this relationship.
And if you could elaborate upon the economic challenges that have risen in Sri Lanka in past 1 year, the causes.
It's actually, if you look at it, the multi-variant of this economic situation. It's not only the present government, it is the previous, as well as the how the debt management, massive debt management was completely neglected. I would say it was not managed very well. Massive infrastructure developments, various loans from China, as well as without much economic returns. And my previous book, The Conundrum of an Island, captures this. Where are the returns of the airports in Mattala, which is a massive investment, again, Hambantota, large-scale infrastructure developments, but then returns was the issue, as well as the borrowings. You can see the significant amount of borrowings from year by year by year. So it's sort of it has gone out of control. And the government, of course, I mean, they pointed out COVID as the biggest concern. COVID was also a concern, of course, because it dried up the tourism revenue as well as the foreign remittance. But that's not the only cause. There also the policy prescription, which came from Colombo. This government, as well as the previous governments, also, I mean, they carried out, I would say, not a practical solution for the economy. For example, the fertilizer concern, it was not the most prudent measure at that time. But I think the policy prescription and the economic realm has to change, as well as in the political dimension also. So there are two sides of the situation which needs to be managed very well. And Sri Lanka needs to get assistance. I mean, it needs technical assistance. It needs to reach out to IMF. It's very important that you do that and you structure the debt that is there. It's a serious concern. And I don't think that, requesting other nations to come and, for debt restructuring, is not a good way to go. So I think it's important that we manage it, as well as, we focus on what Sri Lanka should be doing in the next couple of years. And that's I think the policy prescription needs to be corrected.
And also, like you mentioned, fertilizers, the sudden shift to organic farming, that was also one of the causes, particularly in the midst of the pandemic.
Yeah, definitely, because it created a huge, the supply shortage. It created, it was not the most prudent measure at that time. So there were multiple, for example, weeks ago I heard that, promoting bicycles to work. These are not the most prudent measures. I mean, sailing, yacht marinas. I think essentials, providing the essentials to the people should be the priority right now, because right now you have a situation where the household income is not enough to sustain. Some of the interviews that I carried out was like, they're finding it difficult to buy their medicines, the essential items. So it's not about talking about, I think it's important that you talk about the how to attract tourism and various other stuff, but then not at this point. So right now it's a crucial point. You are at a situation of bankruptcy, and there's multiple warnings that have come in, and many countries have come to assistance as well as, and Sri Lanka should reach out. I'm happy that the finance minister has mentioned that he's going for technical assistance, getting technical assistance from IMF. That's the way forward, actually.
And coming to India and China, where does Sri Lanka see itself in the geopolitical rivalry between India and China? And would it be possible for Sri Lanka to maintain equal distance from both the countries? Or does it have to do a balancing act all the time? Like there were some issues with India being involved in development of the container terminal. So first it was awarded to India, and then it was cancelled, and then India was awarded another terminal to develop, and now Sri Lanka has awarded Trincomalee oil farm to India. So how does Sri Lanka balances India and China relations? Because a Sri Lankan foreign minister's visit to India comes right after China's foreign minister Wang Yi visited Sri Lanka.
The political leadership has mentioned about balancing. Even the present regime, the previous regime, the regime before that, the Rajapaksa, Mahinda Rajapaksa, is about non-aligned and balancing. Although it's mentioned in their election manifesto, as well as in rhetorically says about the balancing act. The problem of the regime, present regime, is that I see a significant China tilt, which is a danger for Sri Lanka. So I've been sort of writing about it, as well as for the last 1 year. It needs to sort of recalibrate its foreign policy to a balanced posture. You mentioned about the East Container Terminal, and that's a very good example. And was there a China hand behind? Yes, there was a China hand behind. So the concern here is also about many other projects, not only about that. the Japanese railway, the light railway project, which was cancelled. And you see the China, the tilt, which is usually the Mahinda Rajapaksa's foreign policy, which has been carried forward by his brother. The importance in Sri Lanka, a country like Sri Lanka, which is located at a very geostrategically important location in the maritime sea lines of communications, it's important to have a balance. One of the reasons is that right now I see that there is a hedging foreign policy which is going on. For example, the visit to the Chinese ambassador's visit to the northern peninsula, in Jaffna. Basically, he's mentioning that this is just the beginning, and when he's ending his visit, reaching out to the Tamilian community. Now, these are not decisions by the Colombo Chinese embassy. These are decisions from Beijing, Beijing's strategic community. And this is something that New Delhi needs to understand, as well as Colombo needs to understand. The larger geopolitical context needs to be understood. Unfortunately, many times it's been misread by Colombo. And this is really unfortunate for both countries. And the situation is that why I say the hedging is the best example when the ambassador's visit was approved by Colombo to go, basically ambassador to visit Jaffna. Weeks before that, you have the successful meeting of Basil Rajapaksa in New Delhi. Then you have Wang Yi's visit a few weeks after that. So, it happens, it's not a sort of, they are orchestrated. Obviously, they're calibrated. So one has to, that's why you have to understand that Colombo has to understand the larger geopolitical context and would need to sort of balance its foreign policy posture, rather than rhetorically mentioning that it's having an India first foreign policy. If it's having an India first foreign policy, which the Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka mentioned one time, but then Sri Lanka should not speak about human rights concerns in Xinjiang. Sri Lanka has gone to defend human rights concerns of Xinjiang, while China has reciprocally mentioned about defending human rights concerns of Sri Lanka. Now, I see significant dangers in this sort of foreign policy posture. And I think when small countries hedge, you miss out the security dimension. This is what I mentioned about a strategic trap in my book, as well as, more than a debt trap, there is a strategic trap, which is supporting the human rights issues, talking about a different development model, which is to a semi-autocratic model, which is like Myanmar or Kazakhstan, that's the second point. And the third is the security assistance and the military assistance from China. So those three attributes actually trigger something which is called the strategic trap, which I have highlighted. So it's important that Colombo understands it, as well as New Delhi understands what's going on in its immediate sphere.
Foreign Minister G.L. Peiris said India's support has given a new energy to the bilateral relations. So apart from India providing economic assistance to Sri Lanka, what would be the other ways of diversifying the India-Sri Lanka relations?
No, definitely. We've established multiple relationships, like the Maldives, Sri Lanka, India trilateral relationship, the defense. That's very important, and that's something that we discussed again in December last year. So those are very important initiatives, but that's not enough. India, Sri Lanka would need to engage in much more strategic relationship dialogues, discussions, especially on the maritime domain, securing its maritime, on the basically on piracy, as well as it's important that India thinks about the southern periphery of India also. It's not all about the northern periphery, but then the southern. So the maritime domain is something very, very important, as well as the India-Sri Lanka strategic dialogues, which needs to be strengthened. One of the reasons I think both countries have a very passive foreign policy posture. So it needs to have a more vibrant, active foreign policy posture. Why I'm saying this is because it's not the 1960s China anymore. It's a China that spends about 5-10 times more in its defense budget. So you have an extra regional rising power in your vicinity, and which both countries need to understand and strengthen its relationship. But unfortunately, some of the policies that come out doesn't support, for example, the democratic vision or the democratic norms and values, which is a serious concern because Sri Lanka has been one of the rich democracies, from its ancient past. So would need to treasure those values. So rather than heavily militarizing with 28 appointments of military, as well as human rights concerns. So there are multiple areas that Sri Lanka needs to focus. And you have the Prevention of Terrorism Act. More than 300 been arrested, and so right now, so you have human rights concerns and various others. So you need to address them. What Dr. Jaishankar mentioned was a very important point, where the 13th Amendment, which is the devolution of power. And so for 35 years, we've been discussing there's no progress. And you have Mahinda Rajapaksa back then, who mentioned about a 13 plus, saying that he give more than 13. These are only rhetoric comments, unfortunately. So here again, you have multiple promises made, but the Tamilian community's grievances are not being addressed. So I think the government needs to sort of recalibrate its posture, or else it'll get into, it's already in a semi-autocratic footing right now with all the character that's what's happening. So I think it's important that you build that relationship with India, and also the other, the nations which has democratic norms, and you protect the rules-based order in the Indian Ocean. And Sri Lanka can play a huge role, and it has the potential to do it.
And like you mentioned, India first policy being followed by a previous government. So I would like to know the role of political dispensation. Like a former President Maithripala Sirisena was considered as closer to India, while the Rajapaksa brothers, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, they are considered as closer to China. So how does India deal with such a situation?
I think both regimes have been basically, if you look at Sirisena, President Sirisena had a foreign policy which is called Asia-centric and balanced foreign policy. At the beginning, they had a start at the beginning of 2015 saying they investigate on the Chinese projects and multiple suspension. And then at the mid term of the presidency, then you have a course correction coming in saying then the Belt and Road is the best initiative, and then moving with China. At the same sort of, I see a similarity when Gotabaya Rajapaksa mentioned that he will revisit the Hambantota agreement. I mentioned in one of my columns saying that he cannot revisit. All these documents which was signed, even the port city, the massive project which was given extra jurisdictional rights, none of the governments or the future governments can revisit. I don't think Sri Lanka has the strength, the muscle, to renegotiate with such a rising power such as China. So these are, I think, I don't think you can. So that's why it's important that you have the dialogue, the discussion, and the discourse with the people, the strategic community before you ink those agreements. But unfortunately, these are done in a very haphazard way, in a quick way. And so I've specifically focused on few of these agreements. Some of them signed on a Sunday and various others. So and it's quite difficult. revisit them. The Rajapaksas have also, Mahinda Rajapaksa, you mentioned that about his China tilt, of course, the China's assistance in the civil war, as well as it played a huge role, as well as the Hambantota port, which was given for for the construction, as well as the multiple the airports and various other infrastructure that was given during Mahinda Rajapaksa's time. So the China's strategic relationship begins with Mahinda Rajapaksa and President Xi's visit back in 2014. And what you have is the continuation of that by Gotabaya Rajapaksa. So balancing act is something that Sri Lankan foreign policy should be focused on rather than hedging. So because it misses out the strategic dimensions on security, and it could even threaten India and India's security. And I think it's important that India-Sri Lanka close relationship. That's why I mentioned even during the submarine visit, I had a few of the articles written that India-Sri Lankan relationship should be much more stronger, so that even if the next submarine comes, it shouldn't be a concern for New Delhi and Colombo. But we have not still developed that. And Colombo needs also to prioritize. It's, for example, the devolution, which was discussed. 35 years it's been dragging. But 13 years now, the civil war has ended back in 2009. So there is no genuine reconciliation. The voices of the NGOs, you have a significant suppression of the NGOs also. They are all monitored by the Defense Ministry. Then you have the NGO registration under the Defense Ministry. So you have a kind of a new model in the making. This is the danger that I am signaling, that Sri Lanka should not go, get in that direction. And the country that, of course, the following is China, the Chinese model. Because the Chinese model of what the Leninist structure, what they have, is a structure that is evolving, and they are also experimenting with it. So I think it's important that Sri Lanka preserves its democratic model and focus, bring back the independent institutions, strengthen the devolution. Because now you mentioned that Dr. Jaishankar mentioned about the devolution, and the foreign minister says his commitment. But then the minister of the provincial councils in the present government does not believe in provincial councils or the devolution. So that's why there is the duality of the policy posture, which needs a correction. I'm sure the correction can be done, and it's healthy for both countries as well as, and there is a huge potential, economic-wise, there's a massive potential for both countries, which has not been tapped.
With the Indo-Pacific region gaining prominence as a geopolitical construct, do you think India and Sri Lanka can redefine their relations as two powers in the Indo-Pacific regions and not just neighbors in South Asia?
No, definitely. There is huge potential. When it comes to the Quad, the alliances, the AUKUS, which is there. But Sri Lanka, to play an active role, needs to be in the rules-based order. Needs to be with the alliance of the democratic nations. So if Sri Lanka keeps practicing going in a semi-autocratic manner, it will eventually get there. And some of the extra-regional partners who support Sri Lankan, different postures on human rights and all that, I think Sri Lanka needs to understand the long-term consequence of these actions. There are limits that India could do also. When it comes to the Tamilian issue, we come to various other concerns. And there is limits that Colombo could also play in their foreign policy. Obviously, Sri Lanka would need the Chinese investments, various other investments from the European Union. It's a relationship with middle powers. It's really important. the Indo-Pacific, of course, the Indo-Pacific construct, Sri Lanka is well positioned in a geographical position in the Indian Ocean, so it can play a huge role. So I think when it comes to piracy issues such as which is the Western Indian Ocean, where the Crimario project is happening by the European Union, for example, Sri Lanka can play a huge role, and also with India. So what Wangi proposed, the island nations should get together. I mean, the island alliances was launched. I mean, sort of, they try to launch it in Sri Lanka, the idea. So there is I would say a significant danger in that because it is a counter idea to what's happening right now. And Sri Lanka should be cautious.
India and Sri Lanka have had uneasy relations over the past 7 decades, mainly due to the Tamil issue. But now we are seeing India reaching out to Sri Lanka to revive the shared links to Buddhism. Do you think both the countries have not yet explored the soft power connections as much as they should have?
No, they have not. The problem is the ultra-nationalist politics. Unfortunately, that has always come to power and played up political the note so high that that we could not I think explore so much of opportunity between the two countries. You mentioned about the soft power diplomacy. There is so much that the pilgrimage, the Buddhism, which that Sri Lanka has got from India. There is so much that we could do, but unfortunately, even the free trade agreements, you can see, are not. So not. I mean, you can do much more. So unfortunately, that doesn't happen because of the inward policies. Even a free trade agreement with, in a country like Singapore, it doesn't happen. So the inward policies, I think, even this is the cause actually for the devolution of power also. And why it's not taking forward, because some of the regimes, the alliances, alliance of the regime, the fractions of regime, does not support the 13th Amendment. And so until we get this thing right, the policy prescription, I don't think we can harness the tremendous the benefits for as well economic benefits as well as the cultural side. There's so much that India and Sri Lanka could do. So the Tamilian issue is the key here, and you need to address that. So what Sri Lanka, the Colombo needs to understand I mentioned this in one of my books called the Kaveri Delta influence, which is the rich Tamilian influence, which is coming into the northern province. And it will not go away, we'd have to sort of take it into our policy calculation. And it's important that we do that. And there is so much that both countries can benefit.
Well, Mr. Asanga Abeyagoonasekera, thank you for your time and for speaking to the Kootneeti.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you. We hope you found this interview informative and insightful. You can tell us what you think in the comment section below, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on various social media websites, the details of which are on your screen. Thanks for watching.